Hi guys, and welcome back to another championship prediction video. We're going on to round 11 now, but quick recap of round 10, and I got no scores correct, and it's the second set of mid-week fixtures in a row where I've got no scores correct. So when it comes to mid-week fixtures, I really seem to struggle. Let's hope we can get some predictions right here. And starting off with Friday night's game, which is Stoke versus West Brom. These are two teams who have a decent amount of Premier League history. Going back 10 years ago, they were both there consistently. But they've dropped down a level and they're both hoping they can get back there consistently. Stoke drew 1-1 with Preston. It was a good game. I heard Stoke were the better team for most of it, but Preston got an equaliser, and Preston, they like drawing games. West Brom, they smashed Cardiff 4-0. Carlan Grant scored one goal in that game, but he got two in the game before against QPR, and he's really came back into form. He's playing well, and West Brom are back to winning ways. So I see West Brom winning this one 3-1. Now moving on to Coventry versus Fulham in Saturday morning's fixture. And what happened midweek to Coventry? High flying, they were playing brilliantly, they could not stop winning to be honest, and then they go to a Luton side who hadn't won in 6 and lose 5-0. It just makes me think, how is that going to affect Coventry moving on now? Because Luton were in bad form, Coventry in great form, and it's what we love about the Championship, to be honest. Anyone can beat anyone, but it does have a mental effect when you lose like that. So I wonder how they'll get on here against a really tough Fulham side. They've won their first game in 3 because they were struggling a little bit, but they beat Swansea 3-1. Mitrovic scoring a hat-trick, so he's in good form. And I think it's going to be a very tight game, to be honest. I think Coventry, that was just a blip against Luton. I think they'll be okay, but I think Fulham are too strong. So I don't think it's going to affect Coventry too much. I don't think they're going to go and lose this game heavily as well. But I do think Fulham will just edge it 2-1. On to the 3 o'clock kickoffs now, and it's another big game. It's Bournemouth versus Sheffield United. Now Bournemouth, they'd won 4 in a row, and then they drew against Peterborough. Peterborough were at home, and they do seem to be quite difficult to beat at home, but I wasn't expecting Peterborough to get anything out of that game. Sheffield United, they were unbeaten in 5. They were playing very well. Then they play a very out-of-form Middlesbrough side, and Middlesbrough end up winning 2-0. So again, more strange results. Championship this season is all over the place. It does tend to be a bit random, but there's not much consistency this season at all. For this one, I think it's going to be very defensive. I think both teams are going to really try and keep a clean sheet and keep it at 0-0. But I can just see Bournemouth snatching a winner in this one because they're doing better. They're in the playoff positions and they don't tend to draw. They do win games recently. So I'm going to go for Bournemouth to win this. Tight game, 1-0. On to Barnsley versus Millwall. And it's two teams that draw a lot. So have I went for a draw here? No, I haven't. Because Barnsley, they haven't won in 8 games. They struggle to score. They just lost 3-1 to Nottingham Forest. They're really not in great form. Whereas Millwall, although they do tend to draw most of their games, they beat Bristol City 1-0. And I just think they're going to continue that form. I can't see Barnsley winning this. I think it will either be Millwall or draw. But I fancy Millwall to sneak this one 2-1. On to Blues' game now, and it's Blues versus Forest. and I'm a bit worried here. Now, Blues, obviously, we haven't scored in 3. We've lost 3 of our last 4. And we lost 2-0 to QPR in midweek. And we just really struggled. We've lost that attacking edge that we had at the start of the season. And we need to find the back of the net soon because we are struggling. And if we struggle to score goals, we're not going to finish anywhere decent this season. Now, we started really strongly. We've dropped off. I'm hoping we can pick it up here, and you'd expect us to, considering Nottingham Forest have picked up the least amount of points this season. Now, I know Derby are bottom, but they've technically picked up 13 points from matches, so Forest have picked up the least points. But since Steve Cooper's been there, they're unbeaten. And they beat Barnsley 3-1. Not that Barnsley are in the greatest of form, but they managed to win that game. And I am worried here. And I was originally going to go for Forest to win this one. And it would be the first time that I'd go for Blues to lose this season. However, Blues' home form isn't that bad. We've lost to Bournemouth and Fulham, which you'd expect. And then we've managed to beat Derby, who strangely seem to be picking up a few points that you wouldn't expect them to be at the moment. And then we've drew the other 2 against Stoke and Preston, which are good points to get. So I'm going to go for a draw here. As much as I originally thought Forest would win, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. On to Blackpool versus Blackburn. And Blackpool, they drew 1-1 with strugglers Hull. They were 1-0 up. Hull had a man sent off. And then they conceded. And for them, it's probably 2 points dropped. But at least they didn't lose the game. Because if they'd have lost to Hull, it would have gave 3 points to someone who's probably going to be in a similar position to them at the end of the season. Blackburn, they lost 3-2 to Huddersfield, but it was only their second loss of the season, and they've been good. Ben Brereton and Diaz can't stop scoring, and I think he's going to score here, and I'm fancying Blackburn to win this one 2-1. Cardiff versus Reading now, and Cardiff are in very bad form. They lost 4-0 to West Brom. They've conceded 9 goals in their last 2 games. And they've lost 4 in a row. So they're not doing well at all. That manager bounce they had when Mick McCarthy joined, it looks like it's gone this season because they're really struggling to pick up points. Reading, they'd won 3 in a row. And then they went to Derby and lost 1-0. So they lost their last game, but they score a lot of goals, and Cardiff at the moment are conceding a lot of goals. So for this one, I have to back Reading, and I'm going Reading 3-1 win. The next game is Derby versus Swansea, and for this one, Derby, they've won 2 out of the last 3 games. They won that one 1-0 against Reading, and Swansea, they lost 3-1 to Fulham, and they've struggled this season so far. So I'm going to back Derby for the first time this season, and I'm going to go them just to edge it 1-0. On to Hull versus Middlesbrough, and I think this is going to be another low-scoring game like Derby v Swansea. For this one, Hull, they just about scraped a 1-1 draw with 10 men against Blackpool, which is a good point for them. They would have obviously liked to win it, but they probably didn't deserve to win the game, so that's fair enough. Middlesbrough, however, were in quite poor form and then go and beat Sheffield United, who were in great form, 2-0. So that surprised me, and I think for this one, they're going to win again because Hull, they haven't won a game since the opening day, obviously meaning they've only won 1 game this season. And I just can't see them winning this one. I think it'll either be a draw or Middlesbrough, and I think it'll be a tight game, but I'm going Middlesbrough to win 1-0. On to Luton versus Huddersfield, and this is one I have no clue about. Luton, obviously, they hadn't won in 6 games, and then they go and beat Coventry 5-0. I didn't see it coming. I don't even think Luton fans would have saw it coming, to be honest. And it's made them quite unpredictable because it could mentally, give them confidence. But it might just be a blip and they might start drawing games again. So I'm not too sure with them. Huddersfield, they beat Blackburn 3-2. And Blackburn are a good side at the moment. And it's put Huddersfield just outside the playoffs. For this one, I think it's going to be high scoring. But I don't think either team's going to get the winner. So I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw. On to Peterborough versus Bristol City. And Peterborough, as I called a few games ago, are quite good at home. It's quite strange because away, they just tend to lose all the time. But at home so far this season, they've won 2, one of them being that 3-0 against Blues. They've drawn against Bournemouth in the most recent game, 0-0, which is another very good result. And they've only lost 1 out of their 5, and it was against West Brom, where West Brom scored in the last minute of the game, and Peterborough had held them to a 0-0 the whole time. So they seem defensively solid at home, and they can score. So it makes this quite difficult to call, because Bristol City, they were unbeaten in 5, and then they lost 1-0 to Millwall. I'm not sure which way this is going to go, but again, I'm going to go down the middle. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. And finally, the last game is QPR v Preston. QPR had lost 3 games in a row, 2-1, and then Blues showed up. And typically, we lost that game, 2-0. So, QPR, they're back to winning ways. Preston, they've drew 5 games in a row, which is quite ridiculous, managing to draw 5 in a row. And the latest was a good point, a 1-1 against Stoke, which I didn't really see that coming. I thought Stoke would win that game. For this one, I think those draws are going to come to an end, and I'm swinging it in QPR's way. I can see QPR winning this 2-1. So that's it. Those are my predictions for this week's Championship fixtures. Please let me know in the comments what you agree with, what you disagree with. Please put your predictions down in the comments. Any shocks you see here, as there's been a lot of shock wins recently. Please like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more Premier League and Championship content. Hopefully we can get some correct scores this weekend and up the Blues.